Thank you for watching. If you like what you see and hear, please subscribe and hit that bell button. Warning, everything you're about to see and hear comes from newspaper articles, court transcripts, and interviews with those involved. Thank you for watching. Vanessa Coleman waited at the Chipman Street house alone. Latavis, George, and Lemaricus would return soon enough and turn her world upside down. An SUV pulled up outside, and the trio emerged with a blindfolded Caucasian girl. She was marched inside and taken into Davidson's room. Lemaricus would eventually place a call to a bank. He had a bank card in his hand, and Vanessa heard him say something about being unable to get a password. The call ends to no avail. Soon Lemaricus would leave with George Thomas and an empty gas can. While they're gone, Latavis Cobbins would make his move. Cobbins left his girlfriend and snuck into the room with Channon. Channon laid there on her back, her hands bound above her head, weighed down with a stuffed duffel bag. Latavis frees her hands from the duffel bag and gives her water. According to Cobbins, Christian would make a deal with the devil. He would say that Channon offered oral sex in exchange for her release. Cobbins would not live up to his end of the bargain. While Shannon Christian was being raped and abused by Latavis Cobbins, Eric Boyd had his eyes on Christopher Newsom. Boyd, Davidson, and Thomas threw Newsom in the car and drove down the street. Thomas was ordered to help get Newsom out of the car and onto the railroad tracks. He refused. He would remain in the car while Eric Boyd and Lemaricus Davidson led Newsom to his death. Newsom would be raped by an object and at least one individual. Thomas would watch as 3 flashes of light would illuminate the dark night. Newsom was shot 3 times and left for dead. Davidson and Boyd returned for the gas can. George Thomas would later say that Eric Boyd carried the gas can down the tracks and used it to set Newsom's body alight. Boyd would return and the trio would drive back to 2316 Chipman Street. They enter the house and Boyd confirms to Davidson that it has been taken care of. Thomas would never hear Shannon Christian's cries or her pleas for someone to save her life. A later autopsy would reveal that Chris Newsom had been anally penetrated 1 to 2 hours before his death. He had lacerations, tearing, and bruising around his anus. He was shot 3 times with a small caliber bullet. The fatal shot was fired with the muzzle against his head above his right ear. As George Thomas and Lemaricus Davidson walk through the door, Vanessa Coleman notices a spot of blood on Davidson's baby blue sweater. A blood stain is visible on the left side of George's dark blue shirt. Chris's blood covered his killers. The 2 men strip and throw their clothes into the washer. Vanessa heard George and Lemaricus have a conversation. Slim needed George to do something so he could trust him. George wasn't going to let down his brother's best friend. They went outside and cleaned out Shannon's Forerunner. Soon they would be giving away her possessions. To them, Shannon Christian was already as good as dead. Vanessa would learn about Chris's brutal murder from Latavis Cobbins, who claimed he obtained the details from his best friend, George Thomas. At some point, Lemaricus Davidson's girlfriend, Daphne Sutton, would arrive. Davidson would give her a bag full of Shannon's possessions. After Sutton left the Chipman Street house, Lemaricus aimed to end Shannon's life for good. Vanessa, Latavis, and George would watch as Lemaricus led Channon into the kitchen. She was naked from the waist down. Lemaricus put one hand on Shannon's chin and the other on the back of her head. He would attempt to snap her neck. Shannon's body hit the floor. In an attempt to destroy evidence, Lemaricus would pour bleach down Shannon's mouth. Then he would force Vanessa to check her pulse. Vanessa was unable to give a definite answer. Lemaricus became upset. Vanessa and Cobbins sought shelter in the living room. They would listen as Channon would be tied up in a fetal position with a plastic bag wrapped over her face before she is finally stuffed into the black trash can. The autopsy would show that the membrane connecting Shannon's lip to her gum had been torn. She had bruising and abrasions around her mouth. Those injuries occurred hours before her death and were likely the result of an object being forced into her mouth. Her anal and genital area suffered significant damage. Her private area showed bruises, contusions, swelling, and lacerations. A solid blood clot had formed under the area. Prosecutors suspect that the damage was caused by a blunt object being slammed into Shannon's privates. Bruises on the back of her arms, front of her legs, and upper back close to her neck. Carpet burns on her lower back and upper buttocks. Extensive hemorrhaging on the top of her head. She had a cut on her right hand, which likely occurred around the time of her death. After committing 2 murders, Latavis Cobbins, George Thomas, Vanessa Coleman, and Lemaricus Davidson knew they were in big trouble. Cobbins, Thomas, and Coleman had to escape Lemaricus's deadly rage. They went to Davidson's former cellmate and friend, Vincent Wernemont. Despite learning about the murders, Vincent agreed to arrange for someone to pick the trio up in Knoxville and transport them to Lebanon, Kentucky. He would give them a place to stay, and he would find a drug addict to take them to Kentucky the following day. After watching the news of the murders on television, Vincent would call and speak with detectives. During his interview, he would receive a call from Latavis Cobbins. That call would lead police to 3 of their murder suspects. Knoxville officers would travel to Kentucky on January the 10th of 2007 with the intention of arresting the suspects who were staying with friend Natasha Hayes. After discovering the body of Christopher Newsom, police began searching the nearby area. Helicopters soared through the sky. Lemaricus was alone, and he knew he needed to escape. Early Monday morning, he called his girlfriend Daphne Sutton and asked her to come get him. Davidson waited in Sutton's car outside. She pulled up in a friend's vehicle and he jumped inside. They went to a friend's apartment and stayed the night. Sutton suspected that Davidson might have been a killer. After all, he was wearing Chris's Nike shoes, and they were obviously too small. She slept with him anyway. He thrusted up against her, even though she probably knew that he was a cold-blooded killer. On Tuesday afternoon, Sutton received a call from her mother. She was told that a body had been discovered in her house. She knew at that point that she could no longer deny her suspicions. She transported Davidson to Ridgebrook Apartments, where he would meet Eric Boyd. There, the duo would stay with Danielle Lightfoot. Lightfoot knew something was odd about Boyd, but she didn't think too much about it. The group smoked marijuana and watched the local news at 11 p.m. Lightfoot listened intently as the details of the Channon Newsom murders were broadcast on television. She ignored it. The following day, she watched a news report about the murders once again. This time, they would show pictures of Davidson and his brother, Latavis. "I don't know what's going on. My brother did something," was Davidson's response. Lightfoot went to Atlanta and left the couple in her apartment. When she returned later that night, she forced him to leave because she did not want the police to come to her house. Boyd and Davidson would not put up a fight. They thanked her and hugged her for letting them stay. Boyd would help Davidson hide in a vacant house at 1800 Reynolds Avenue. The house was within sight of the Ridgebrook apartment complex. It is here that Davidson would make his final stand. He was scared, frightened, and had very little to lose. Would he go down without putting up a fight? On the next episode, he would be arrested on his way to deliver food to Lemaricus. Authorities surrounded the house at 1800 Reynolds Avenue